So, good day and welcome everyone. Today I will attempt to recreate a Minimoog or emulate Minimoog in the grid as close as possible. The pacing might be a little bit different because I'm going to do a lot of comparisons, and I'll just let you follow along the process so that you can see how I do it. Whenever it seems too slow paced for you, you can of course just skip ahead, increase the playback speed of the video, or go forward to the next chapter. I will of course put in markers. So I hope you enjoy this, and so let's get started. Well, as a reference, since I do not have an original Minimoog, I will take the Model 72 by Softube. In my opinion, probably one of the best emulations, or at least one of the most pleasant sounding in my opinion, because since I do not have an original, I cannot do a direct comparison. So what I have here is a basic preset with filter fully open, resonance fully closed, all the filter modulation and key tracking turned off, and one oscillator open, the others closed, so that we can see what's coming out and do kind of listening comparisons while we recreate the oscillators from this thing. No doubling, no distortion, no spreading. So just pure, and then we will go through these oscillator waveforms and see if we can get something similar in the grid. I also have, nope, that was not the intention. I have two MIDI regions, which both are playing one note, C1 in this case, and I will just play these test tones while I look at certain things in the oscilloscope and do A-B comparisons. That's also why I assigned the two channels to A and B. And I can now use my MIDI controller, an Akai MPC40 in this case, to fade back and forth between the two inputs, the A and B. Okay, on the grid side, I have a default, at least that's the default how I saved it. I think I added an additional attenuator because I think it's useful. But now get started. First, as you saw in the kick tutorial, maybe I like to compare stuff a little bit in the oscilloscope. So let's drop one in. Resize it. I also increase the size here a tiny bit so that you can see what I'm doing. So, and we need a sidechain. Where is it? Audio sidechain. And I'm going to use the Model 72 synthesizer and pre-fader so that it's not affected by the A-B crossfade that I'm doing. And plug this in here so that I can see the waveform. And okay, let's switch that to pitch. And I also want to mute the current channel. And now we can see the waveform which is coming out from the Model 72. Well, Bitwig, I think I heard them saying that the Union oscillator is kind of emulating Moog stuff, which in my opinion isn't true. The waveforms are way too clean. So what we are going to do is we're going to use one of the new oscillators. Oh, no, well, there's only one. So we're going to use the scroll oscillator, which allows us to draw in the waveform and emulate this shape really, really close. And we're going to use this ADSR envelope and leave it on analog, which gives us some kind of nonlinear behavior on a micro level. So, and what we also need to do before we even start, we need to set up the circuit. So we need to pass the oscillator through a filter, which we have here. We have the low pass MG, and MG stands for Moog or Moog. This is an emulation of the legendary filter. And let's pipe everything through. Don't want to listen to it right now. And let's drop in an attenuation device so that we can adjust the amplitude in the scope, and now hook this one up, which should give us a signal right away. So, of course, now we want to open the filter and reduce the resonance. I also want to reduce the Q limit to like minus, let's say, 2 decibels, so that the filter does not go into clipping as quickly. Okay, so let's get started. I want to give this a different color so that I can easily distinguish between the two different waveforms. And let me adjust the amplitude here a bit. And now let's try to emulate the waveform. So, but I'd rather start at 0 and draw it in like that. And so that we can overlay them properly, I need, or I want to go to data, to phase, and grab a phase shifter, which I'll use to move the waveform in the correct position so that I can get a perfect overlay. So now let's open that up and make some kind of fine adjustments, disable snap. Oh, that's way too much. Okay, now we're getting really close. You can see over time we drift a little bit apart, so we just have to, not here, we have to correct this with the phase here. Okay. Yeah, now we have an almost perfect overlap. So let's do the A-B comparison. Well, looks like we have to adjust the volume a little bit. This one is -8, this one is a -15. Well, it seems like the grid sounds a tiny bit brighter. Yeah, but that's probably as close as we get. So now that we have this, we can copy it and put it on the side for later. Well, let's call it MG Moog triangle. And now go to the next waveform, which is called shark fin. Mute the channel again. And now let's try to recreate this waveform. Yeah, that's a pretty decent overlap. So let's do comparison. And maybe you can see when I look only at the Moog signal, this is kind of flickering it a little bit here. And this is caused by the filter. So if you open it up a tiny little bit, which needs some amplitude adjustment, you can see the same starts happening here. It is not exactly the same, but it's pretty similar. And I found out that what counts as 0% resonance in the Minimoog or in the Model 72 is about equal to 11% resonance here. So we can just statically place it here and assume this is 0% in the Moog. And you can now see the flickering is here. It looks pretty identical. Now let's listen to it. Yeah, the Moog just sounds a tiny little bit brighter, or almost a bit dirtier. Yeah, looks like we kind of have to live with this difference. So maybe we can add some saturation later on. But for now, this should be good enough. We don't need these phase shifters here anymore. I'll call this shark fin. Okay, the next waveform is the sawtooth. So let's do the comparison again. So one thing we realize is that the amplitude changes on the Model 72 when we switch to sawtooth, so which is something to keep in mind when we want to model it in the grid, that we kind of add some amplification to the sawtooth so that we get similar behavior, or we can also just, kind of leave it and say we're going to use these knobs to mix the oscillators anyway, so we can always adjust the volume to whatever we want. Just something to keep in mind. So that was a quick one. So let's move that one a bit out of the way. That was our sawtooth. So now let's go to the next, which is a square wave. Ooh. So that's kind of interesting how a square wave looks like. So it almost looks like there is some sawtooth mixed into it. Okay. Snap. Let's use the snap to get to the middle. Well, the Moog sounds significantly kind of dirtier here, despite when we look at the waveform, it sounds quite similar. So let's add some phase modulation. Just a tiny bit to add some dirt. This is, of course, way too much. Now I know why this filter, why it always sounds brighter. It's because we have key tracking enabled. Turn this down, and now yeah, that's the solution. And I hope you can hear how modulating the phase a little bit with the sine wave adds this kind of dirt that we have in the Moog. So cool. Take the entire thing, copy it. Actually, we can hook it up. Yeah, we can hook it up directly, but then we have to listen to it to see how it sounds. Yep, that's about right. Move it over here. So maybe I should prefix everything with MG. So, 2 more left. The pulse wide. So maybe we want the same kind of phase modulation. Dirty up the signal, but we'll see if we need it. So mute and yeah, almost perfect. Okay. So maybe we can then simplify this and use only one phase modulator. And now the last one, this one. Yeah, pretty identical. And we do not have any. Well, we do. Yeah, that doesn't need any phase modulation. Okay, so we're done creating the waveforms. And, well, this, how are they called? Pulse. And now we just need to hook them up the right way so that we can switch back and forth between all of these waveforms. Okay, the first is this one. The second one is the shark fin. The third one is the sawtooth. Then we have the square. Then we have the pulse, and then we have the pulse narrow. And now I want a merge module with 6 inputs. And now first this one, shark, saw, square, pulse wide and pulse narrow. And now a value knob, which allows us to change the waveform. But you also want to switch to nearest so that we can switch between the waveforms. And maybe I want an oscilloscope just to indicate what is currently selected. Yeah, because this is waveform. Waveform. Okay. Then maybe because the Moog is an analog device, its oscillators are not 100% stable. They kind of tend to drift a little bit, and we might want to emulate this behavior as well. So let's go to phase and grab a phaser. Now we will turn off all the phases of our oscillators and control them with the phaser. I suppose here we just have to add a mixer. Yeah, let's grab a mixer. This one is 0, and this one will get a different amplitude. We'll check how much this will have to be and hook it up like this. Let me think, is this correct? Yeah, we will see. So now let's hook this up to the filter. Drag the output, place it here, grab everything. So. Yeah, we wanted to implement the drift. So let's go to random, get a sample and hold LFO, turn that off, move that fully clockwise, and let's grab a modulation out. And now we only have to apply the drift to the phaser. well, that's of course way too much. But now we can reduce it to something that's almost zero. Okay, that one did not work. We have to increase this to 100%, of course. Here as well. Now let's see how the filter sounds. Now the filter, well, just sounds the way it sounds. There's not much we can do. But as far as I can tell, it's a pretty close emulation. Now, okay, let's open this one in parallel so that we can do some comparisons. Let's open this one as well. Well, while it's not 100% identical, it is very close, very close. So that is neat. But I mean, there's one thing that Minimoog can do, which we cannot do in the grid, and that is using feedback. Well, unfortunately for us, sounds pretty interesting. Yeah, as you can hear, this is pretty awesome, and unfortunately there's no way we can emulate this in the grid. But then, of course, we do have other options, and now we have one oscillator. And now let's see what happens if we duplicate them and mix them all together. And the third one. I maybe want to attenuate the volume a bit, because the cumulation here, of course, leads to an increased volume, which then drives the filter, which I do not want yet. Let's go for 3 sawtooths. Now, when we compare this to the model 72, we will hear a slight difference. So let's open them up, all at the same octave, all on Sawtooth. So. Well, we can hear this kind of flanging going on because the oscillators are slightly detuned to each other. So this is something we have to do as well in our grid. It's happening a tiny little bit because we added these little drifters here. But now we want to add this a bit more prominent. And maybe just add a tiny bit, just +1. Let's get this one -0.1. And then here maybe +0.2. Yeah, I think should be a tiny bit faster. I'm of course a fool because modulating these here won't do anything. We have to do it. Let's leave this one at 0. This one +2 and again this one. Okay, we have some more amplitude. So, well, of course, we could now continue to play until with these values until we have a perfect match. But now let's introduce a new envelope, ADSR for the filter. As always, I connected the wrong output. Yeah, I think it is not perfect, but it is pretty damn close. Well, especially if you now compare this to other emulations like Arturia, they all sound different and probably more different than what we have now sounds different to the Model 72. And since we are in BitBig and we now have a modular, version of a Minimoog here, which of course we can expand. We can introduce, I don't know, phase modulation. We can introduce, instead of switching between the waveforms, we can just fade between the waveforms. We can add any number of oscillators that we want. We can add more filters. We can add different filters. We can, well, mix in some wavetable stuff, whatever. Whatever we see fit. And yeah, I think this is really cool. And I think we have proven that it can sound pretty close, and we can get this fat Moog sound in the grid, which is awesome. Now, I hope you found it interesting, you know, the way we approach this, you know, getting the oscillator waveforms right, then adding some dirt using phase modulation, then hooking everything up, routing it through the filters, do some comparisons. And of course, now you can go here and save these waveforms. And you know, you have them, you can load them up in all of your patches that you create. So yeah, so comment, like, subscribe, and I'll see you soon.